Today, I want to tell you a story so intense it divided a town and united two worlds. It unfolds in the raw heart of the American West, where dust clung to every breath and danger lived just beyond the horizon. This was a place where prejudice was law and compassion was considered rebellion. It all started with one moment, a wounded child, a woman's decision, that appeared small, yet carried enough weight to challenge power, tradition, and the meaning of humanity itself. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The sun rose hard over Red Mesa, beating down like iron on a forge, baking the dust into pale ribbons along the street. Martha Kells stood at the lone window of her cabin, watching neighbors rush past as if she were part of the woodwork. The hands that had eased hundreds of infants into this world shook as she crushed a folded note in her fist. Another refusal, another reminder of what the town said she lacked. Barren. The word tolled inside her skull like a church bell at burial. In a frontier place where a woman's value was tallied by cradles filled, Martha Kells counted for nothing. It meant nothing that she had saved more lives than Dr. Vernon Pike with his polished schooling from back east. It meant nothing that women whispered her name when pain seized them in the night. She was 43, childless, and, by Red Mesa's measure, useless. The cabin seemed to draw tight around her, walls heavy with 20 years of memory. Every corner carried a face. Pearl Whiten, who nearly bled out delivering twins. Esther Dunley, the mayor's own wife, who had begged Martha to come when Dr. Pike had washed his hands of the case. Cora Bellin, barely 16, fingers biting into Martha's skin through the worst of it. Yet none of them met her eye anymore, not since preacher Gideon Slade thundered from the pulpit about women who defied God's order. Martha crossed to her cabinet, brushing jars and corks she'd gathered over decades. Laudanum for pain, willow bark for fever, herbs learned from a Mexican woman long gone. Each bottle was earned knowledge, paid for in long nights and steadied nerves, not diplomas that barred women at the door. What good was knowing, though, when the town would not let her practice? The cabin trapped the heat, but outside waited judgment. She had kept her chin up through months of whispers and turned backs, until last week broke something clean through. Violet Dane, heavy with her 5th child, went into labor early. The family sent for a doctor. Dr. Pike first, of course. When the baby turned wrong and panic rose with Violet's screams, someone ran for Martha. She snatched her bag and ran the length of Maine, heart hammering with the old mix of fear and resolve. But at the Dane house, Horace Dunley himself filled the doorway. "We don't need you," he said, mustache stiff with disgust. "Dr. Pike has it handled." "Please," Martha said, hearing the cries inside. "I've handled breech births. Let me help." "A barren woman has no place at a birth." Preacher Gideon Slade cut in from behind, black coat crow dark in the heat. "It's unnatural, ungodly." The door slammed. Martha stood in the street with her bag hanging dead weight, listening. 2 hours later, the screaming stopped. Mother and child were gone. The memory burned like lye. She stood at the funeral's edge while Dr. Pike accepted condolences and spoke of God's mysteries. No one said she might have saved them. No one cared. A knock pulled her back. Visitors were scarce now. When she opened the door, Wes Branton, the sheriff's boy, shifted on his heels, eyes darting. "Miss Kells," he said low. "Pa sent me. There's a meeting tonight. About you." Her stomach dropped. "They're saying you practice without authority, that you're a danger." He flushed. "Pa wanted to warn you. Said you might think about moving on." After 20 years of service, they meant to drive her out. Martha thanked him and shut the door, leaning hard against it. Where would she go? No family left? No savings? Every dollar had gone into supplies and this cabin. The afternoon crawled. She tried to sort her jars, but her hands wouldn't settle. She had delivered Wes himself 17 years back, in a whiteout when the nearest doctor was unreachable, saved his mother when things went bad. Now they wanted her gone. As dusk crept in, she put on her best dress, a faded blue calico, and pinned her graying hair tight. If they meant to run her off, she would meet it standing. The meeting was in the church, white walls glowing orange with sunset. She could hear the crowd before she reached the door. She drew a breath and went in. Talk died at once. Faces turned, hostile, ashamed, and cold. Horace Dunley stood at the pulpit, Dr. Vernon Pike and Preacher Gideon Slade flanking him like men at an execution. "Ah, Miss Kells," the mayor said. Horace Dunley's voice carried the thin varnish of courtesy a man uses when he knows he is about to do something ugly. "Good of you to attend." Martha Kells walked the length of the center aisle, her boots striking the planks with steady taps. She held her head high, meeting the eyes of women she had once helped through blood and fear. Most of them looked away. "We are gathered to address a serious concern," Horace Dunley continued. "The unauthorized practice of medicine within Red Mesa." Dr. Vernon Pike stepped forward, his narrow face tight with self-importance. "Miss Kells has interfered with proper medical care for far too long. She has no formal training, no license, no right to call herself a midwife." "I've delivered half the children in this town," Martha said quietly, her voice carrying farther than she expected. "And how many did you lose?" Dr. Pike snapped back. "How many women suffered because of your ignorance?" "Fewer than died under your care," Martha replied. A ripple moved through the pews. "Silence," Preacher Gideon Slade thundered. "This woman stands before God and this community as a violation of his order. Barren herself, she dares to meddle in the sacred act of creation. It is blasphemy." The word hung heavy. Martha felt heat flood her face, but she did not step back. "Furthermore," Dunley added, "there are complaints. Agnes Haller claims you gave her daughter herbs that made her ill, and Roy Dane," he paused, "says you filled his head with false hope, claiming you could have saved Violet Dane." That cut deep. "I could have saved her," Martha burst out, "if you hadn't barred me from the house." "Enough." Dunley's face reddened. "This town now has a qualified doctor. We do not need a barren woman pretending at medicine. I move that Martha Kells be forbidden from all medical practice within town limits, effective immediately." "I second it," Dr. Pike said without hesitation. The vote came quick and clean. Hands rose. Just like that, her life's work was stripped away. When it ended, people filed out fast, eyes fixed anywhere but on her. Soon, only the cross on the wall remained to witness her. Outside, desert wind stirred dust devils along Main Street. Martha walked back toward her cabin, each step dragging like a mile. Somewhere beyond the town, a coyote cried, a long, hollow sound that matched the ache in her chest. She was alone now, barren, discarded like a tool worn past use. Yet when she reached her cabin and saw her medical bag waiting by the door, something stubborn flared. They could take her permission, but not her knowledge. They could not erase the lives she had saved, or the skill in her hands. Martha lifted the bag and held it close. Whatever came next, she would endure. She had survived 43 years on this hard land. She would survive this too. The sun sank behind the hills, staining the sky with blood-red promise. Far off, thunder rolled, a storm forming in the desert. Change was coming. Ready or not? 3 days passed after the meeting, and Martha Kells barely left her cabin. Shelves once full of supplies stood thin now. She had given what she could to the Mexican families on the edge of town, the only one still willing to accept her help. The rest she packed, though she had no destination. The fourth morning broke hotter than the rest, the air heavy as wool. Martha stood at her window, watching dust devils twist down the empty street. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats, many of them, pounding in fast from the desert. Red Mesa froze. Martha moved to the door as others did, faces pale with fear. The Apache never came to town, and never in numbers. The fragile peace between them and the settlers depended on distance and restraint. This was neither. The riders came with purpose. The lead figure emerged through the heat shimmer, tall and commanding, and Martha's breath caught. Even from afar, his presence carried weight. As he drew closer, details sharpened. Traditional dress edged with silver, a rifle slung across his back, dark hair bound with feathers. But it was what he carried that stole her breath. A child, a boy no older than 10, limp in his arms. Behind him rode nearly 20 warriors. Their faces were painted, but their weapons remained sheathed. The message was unmistakable. They came out of desperation, not attack. Panic tore through town. Women grabbed children and fled indoors. Men scrambled for rifles. Sheriff Cole Branton stepped out of his office, hand hovering near his pistol, his fear plain as anyone else's. The Apache leader, there was no mistaking that, rode straight down Main Street, untouched by the shouting and scrambling around him. His dark gaze swept the storefronts until it locked on what he was searching for. Dr. Vernon Pike's office, its painted sign swinging in the heat. He did not slow. He passed it by. From her doorway, Martha Kells watched, stunned as the rider reined in when their eyes met. "You," he said, his English rough but clear, "you are the healing woman, not the man with papers." The words cracked through the silence. Red Mesa held its breath. Dr. Pike stepped out onto his porch, face tight with outrage. Then the chief's glance cut him short. When the man turned back to Martha, she saw it plainly. The naked fear of a father watching his child fade. "My son," he said. "Snake bite. 2 days past. Our healers tried. He is dying." Martha looked at the boy, cradled in his arms. Even from where she stood, the signs were unmistakable. The swelling, the flushed skin, the shallow pull of breath. Rattlesnake. 2 days was bad. Very bad. "Bring him inside," she said before she could think. "No." Horace Dunley stepped forward, flanked by armed men. "Miss Kells, you are forbidden to practice medicine, and you," he pointed at the rider, "have no business here. Take your boy and leave." The chief's face did not change, but his men shifted in their saddles. One shot, one twitch, and Main Street would turn to blood. "The boy will die," Martha said, stepping out onto the dirt. "Is that what you want on your conscience?" "Better that than an Indian uprising," someone yelled. The chief dismounted in one smooth motion, never loosening his hold on the child. He walked straight toward Martha, ignoring the rifles lifting around him. Up close, the lines of exhaustion and grief cut deep into his weathered face. "I am Tyan," he said. "War Chief, this is my son, Kiro. Save him, and you have my protection." The unspoken threat hung heavy. Martha looked down at the boy, so small, so untouched by the hatred between their peoples, then up at Dr. Pike, frozen in his doorway, doing nothing. "Bring him," she said to Tyan, turning for her cabin. "Stop!" Sheriff Cole Branton drew his gun. "Miss Kells, I'm warning you." "Then shoot me," Martha said without looking back. "But remember, when this child dies and his father's warriors paint for vengeance, remember you could have stopped it. Remember how many lives your pride has already cost." She stepped inside, leaving the door open. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Tyon followed. His men dismounted and formed a tight ring around the cabin. Inside, Martha was already in motion, driven by habit carved over decades. "Put him on the table," she ordered, sweeping supplies aside with one arm. Tyon laid Cairo down, as if lowering something sacred. In the window light, Martha saw the wound clearly. 2 punctures, swollen and dark, red lines climbing the boy's leg. The venom was spreading. "When was he bitten?" she asked, hands moving. 2 sons, Tyon said. "We cut. We drew the poison. We used our sacred herbs. Nothing worked." Martha nodded. Apache medicine was strong, but rattlesnake venom was merciless. She checked Cairo's pulse, fast, weak. His skin burned. Shock was setting in. "I need water," she said. "Boiled, as much as you can, and ice. The ice house behind the store." Tyon barked orders in his language. Feet ran. Ignoring the shouts outside, Martha worked fast. She cut away the boy's leggings, exposing the wound. The flesh was dying, but not beyond hope. There was still a chance. She reached for her supplies, ammonia, whiskey, and her last precious vial of foxglove extract for the heart. First, the wound had to be cleaned. The door slammed open. "Doctor." Vernon Pike stormed in, face purple. "This is intolerable. You have no—" He stopped when Tyon turned, hand drifting to the knife at his belt. "You," the chief said quietly. "Paper medicine man. Why do you not help?" Pike stammered. "Snake bites, after this long, they're fatal." "So you do nothing," Tyon said, contempt sharp as steel. "You let a child die because your papers say he is already dead." "Get out," Martha said, eyes never leaving her work. "Or help, but don't stand there hiding behind excuses." Dr. Pike fled. Martha barely noticed. Her world had narrowed to the boy on the table, and the thin, fragile line between life and death. Martha Kells had narrowed her world to the boy on the table. She cleaned the wound with whiskey, watched the rise and fall of his chest, felt the fluttering beat beneath her fingers. When the boiled water arrived, carried in by Stonewind riders who glared at the townspeople crowding outside, she set to the real work. "Hold him," she said to Tyon. "This will hurt." The chief took his son's hands, murmuring softly in his own tongue. Martha made small, careful cuts around the punctures, opening paths for the poisoned blood to drain. The boy moaned but did not wake. A bad sign. She worked without pause for the next hour, moving between the wound and the failing body that carried it. A measured dose of foxglove to steady the heart. Ammonia beneath the nose to pull breath back. Cold cloths to fight the fire burning under his skin. Outside, the noise grew. Angrier. Sharper. Someone shouted about sending word to the cavalry at Fort Benson. Others argued that raising arms against the Apache would mean war. Through it all, Tyon's warriors stood silent, eyes fixed, unblinking. "Why?" Tyon asked suddenly. "Why help when your people forbid it?" Martha glanced up only long enough to answer. "Because I'm a healer. It's what I am." "They cast you out, call you worthless." "Yes." She checked the boy's pulse again. "A calling doesn't end just because others refuse to see it." The beat under her fingers steadied. Barely, but enough. Tyon was quiet a long moment. "My people have stories," he said. "Women who walk between worlds. Spirit healers, they are sacred to us." "Your people are kinder than mine," Martha said, and went back to work. The afternoon wore on. She laid poultices to draw the poison, slipped drops of water between the boy's lips, watched the signs like a hawk. Slowly, painfully slowly, Cairo began to turn. His breathing deepened. The red streaks halted. The fever broke. At sunset, the boy's eyes fluttered open. Tyan made a sound Martha had never heard, half prayer, half sob. "Father," Kiro whispered. Tyan gripped his son's hand, tears cutting clean tracks down his face. He looked at Martha with something close to awe. "He will live. If infection doesn't set in, if he rests, if the fever stays down," Martha said. "Yes, I believe he will." Tyan rose carefully, never letting go of Cairo's hand. He studied her a long moment. "You have given me back my son. This debt cannot be repaid. From this day you are under our protection." He lifted his voice and spoke to his warriors outside. Their reply rolled back, a sound that sent a shiver through Martha, not of fear, but recognition. She had been named, claimed as one to be guarded. "We will camp beyond the town tonight," Tyan said. "Tomorrow, if my son can travel, we return to our people. But you—" His eyes held hers. "You will always have a place among us." Martha nodded, the weight of exhaustion settling in. She had saved the boy, and she knew the price would come. Through the window she could see townspeople gathering, faces twisted with fear and rage. She had defied them openly, aided the ones they called enemies. Consequences would follow. Looking at Cairo's peaceful face, his small hand wrapped in his father's, she found she did not care. For the first time in months, perhaps years, she felt whole again. She remembered why she had chosen this path. Not for approval, not for belonging, but for moments when skill and mercy wrested life back from death's grasp. The night stretched tight and uneasy. Campfires burned outside, shadows of Stonewind riders dancing against Red Mesa's walls. The town withdrew behind doors and shutters, watching, waiting. At dawn, the desert blushed rose and gold. Martha checked her patient once more. The fever had stayed down. Breathing was steady. The wound, still angry, showed no sign of the spreading rot she feared. "He needs another day before traveling," she told Tyan, who had not left his son's side. "Moving him too soon could—" A commotion cut her short. Through the window, Horace Dunley approached with Sheriff Cole Branton and a dozen armed men. Dr. Vernon Pike strutted alongside them, medical bag swinging. "Here we go," Martha murmured, stepping onto the porch. "Martha Kells," Dunley's voice boomed across the dust. "By the authority vested in me as mayor of Red Mesa, I order you to surrender that Indian child to Dr. Vernon Pike's care immediately." Martha stood her ground, aware of Apache warriors rising behind her, hands drifting toward weapons. "The boy cannot be moved," she said evenly. "He's responding to treatment." "Treatment by an unlicensed practitioner," Pike snapped. "This is a matter of public health. I demand to examine the patient." Tyan appeared in the doorway behind Martha, his presence filling the space, hard and unmistakable. "The woman saved my son," Tyan said, his voice steady and sharp. He turned his gaze on Dr. Vernon Pike, contempt undisguised. "You would have let him die." "Now see here," Pike began, but Tyan cut him off. "I watched you yesterday. I saw you hide in your wooden box while a child lay dying. You are no healer. You are a coward with papers." Color rushed into Pike's face. He spun toward the law. "Sheriff, I demand you arrest this woman for practicing medicine without a license and endangering public welfare." Sheriff Cole Branton shifted, his hand resting on his holster, but he did not draw. He was badly outnumbered, and everyone knew it. "Perhaps," a new voice broke in, "we should see the patient before making arrests." Martha turned to find Edgar Loomis, the town's bank president, pushing through the crowd. His wife, Faye Loomis, stayed close at his side. "Edgar, what are you doing?" Horace Dunley snapped. Being reasonable, Loomis replied evenly. If the boy is truly improving, then Martha Kells has done what Dr. Pike said was impossible. I'd like to see that for myself. So would I, Faye said, surprising nearly everyone. She rarely spoke in public. Martha delivered all 3 of my children safely. I trust her judgment. A murmur spread. Then another voice, Irene Cutter, speaking of the hemorrhage Martha had stopped when no one else could. Pearl Whiten mentioned the twin birth everyone said would kill her. One by one, the women found their courage. Enough! Preacher Gideon Slade surged forward, black coat flapping. This woman consorts with heathens. She defies God's will and the natural order. What's unnatural, Martha said, her voice clear and carrying, is letting a child die because of prejudice. What defies God is turning away from suffering when you have the power to stop it. Let them see, Tyan said suddenly. He stepped aside, gesturing towards the cabin. Let all see what the paperman would not do, and what the healing woman did. After a moment's hesitation, Loomis moved forward, followed by Faye and several others. Even some of Dunley's armed men lowered their weapons, curiosity overtaking fear. Inside the cabin, Cairo lay quietly beneath one of Martha's quilts. Color had returned to his face. When the strangers entered, his eyes opened. Clear, aware. "Papa?" he said softly, searching. Tyan was at his side in an instant, taking his hand. "I am here, my son." Dr. Pike edged forward to examine the boy, though Tyan's warning stare kept him from touching. Even at a distance, the change was undeniable. The swelling had receded. The wound was clean, beginning to heal. "Impossible?" Pike muttered. "After 2 days, the venom should have destroyed the tissue." "Should have killed him," Martha said calmly. "By textbook rules, yes. But medicine isn't only what's written in books, it's observation, adaptation, and sometimes stubborn refusal to quit." She opened her cabinet, laying out supplies. "I drained what venom I could, neutralized the rest with ammonia and alcohol, stabilized his heart with foxglove extract, and I watched him, constantly adjusting as needed." "Digitalis?" Pike's eyes widened. "That could have killed him." "In the wrong dose," Martha said evenly. "In the right one, it saved him. I've used foxglove for 15 years. I know it better than any text." Faye Loomis stepped closer. "May I?" she asked Tyan. When he nodded, she touched the boy's forehead gently. "No fever." "It broke overnight," Martha said. "The danger has passed, but he'll need close care." "Then he stays," Tyan declared. "Here, under the healing woman's watch." "Absolutely not," Dunley snapped, finding his voice again. "I won't have Apache camped in my town." "Your town?" Tyan's voice dropped, quiet and deadly. "This land was Apache before your grandfathers were born. We allow you here, not the other way around." Hands moved toward weapons. The air tightened. "Stop," Martha said firmly. "This is a sick room, not a battlefield. If you want blood, take it somewhere else." She turned to Tyan. "Your son needs quiet," Martha Kells said evenly. "Rest. Fear and shouting will only slow his healing." She turned her gaze on Horace Dunley. "And you, Mayor, ought to ask yourself what you're really afraid of." "Is it the Apache?" she went on. "Or is it the fact that someone you labeled worthless just proved her worth?" "How dare you?" Dunley began. "I dare because there's nothing left to take," Martha cut in. "You've already stripped my work, my standing. What else can you do to me?" "We could run you out of town," someone yelled. "Yes," Martha agreed without flinching. "You could. And when your wives go into labor, when your children fall sick, when accidents come, as they always do, who will you turn to? Dr. Vernon Pike, who hides behind certificates while people die?" Pike sputtered. But before he could answer, Edgar Loomis spoke again. She has a point. Charles, like it or not, this town needs Martha's skills. She defied the council, Dunley snapped. To save a life, Faye Loomis said. I don't see a crime in that. More voices joined, mostly women, a few men. The balance shifted, and Dunley felt it. Fine, he spat. Let the savage stay until he can travel, but you— He jabbed a finger at Martha. You're finished here. When they leave, you leave with them. You can't exile a citizen without cause, Loomis protested. I'm the mayor, Dunley shot back. I'll find cause. He turned on his heel and stalked off, his followers trailing after him. The cabin suddenly felt crowded with those who remained. Martha noticed the looks, still cautious but changed, edged now with reluctant respect. Martha, Faye said softly, I'm sorry for all of it. We should have stood up sooner. Martha nodded, too worn for resentment. What's done is done. Right now, my concern is my patient. People filtered out, leaving Martha with Tyann, Cairo, and, unexpectedly, Dr. Pike lingering near the door. That was competent work, he admitted stiffly, especially the digitalis. Where did you learn to dose it so precisely? Mostly trial and error, Martha said, preparing a fresh poultice, and paying attention to what works. Medicine is as much art as science. Doctor, she added without looking up, if you spent less time hiding behind your diploma and more time observing your patients, you'd know that. Pike flushed, but he didn't argue. He watched her steady hands. When she began mixing herbs for a cooling tea, he spoke again. Those plants, where did you learn their uses? From anyone willing to teach, Martha replied. Mexican curanderas, traveling healers, an old Chinese herbalist years ago. She glanced at Tyann. And the Apache, when knowledge was shared. The colleges would call that superstition, Pike muttered. The colleges would have let this boy die, Martha said. Pike had no answer. He left quietly, doubt flickering in his eyes. As the day wore on, a strange calm settled. Stonewind riders kept watch, but relaxed. Some even accepted water from brave townswomen. Cairo strengthened by the hour, sipping broth, whispering to his father. And Martha, at last, felt like a healer again. Exile didn't matter. The future could wait. In this small cabin, home and hospital, she was where she belonged. You are troubled, Tyann observed as evening drew near. Martha looked up from grinding herbs. Your son will recover. That's what matters. No, Tyann said gently. The town chief says you must leave. This troubles you. It's been my home 20 years, Martha admitted, but perhaps it's time for change. Tyann was quiet a moment. Among my people, healers are honored, protected. A woman is not cast out for bearing no children. The offer hung between them. Unexpected, generous, tempting. Martha looked at Kiro, sleeping peacefully now, then at his father's steady, respectful gaze. I need time, she said softly. Take it, Tyann replied. But know this, whether you come with us or stay, you will always be known among the Apache as the one who saved the war chief's son. Night settled over Red Mesa again. From her window, Martha saw two worlds, the town that rejected her and the people who offered belonging. Tomorrow, Cairo would be strong enough to travel. Tomorrow, she would choose. Tonight, she had work. A patient to watch, medicines to prepare, a life to guard through the dark hours. For now, that was enough. The morning of departure broke beneath a crimson sunrise, the desert washed in blood red and gold. Martha Kells had spent the night showing Tyann how to tend Kiro's wound, what herbs to use, how to watch for swelling, what signs would mean danger. The boy was strong enough to travel now, though he would ride pressed against his father's chest, not alone. As Martha wrapped Kiro's leg in clean bandages, she felt a presence at the door. She looked up to find several Apache women standing there, so quiet she hadn't heard them approach. The eldest stepped forward, hair threaded with silver, skin etched by years of sun. She carried a bundle wrapped in deerskin. "I am Selah," she said in careful English. "You saved my nephew." She offered the bundle. Martha took it with both hands, understanding the weight of the gift. Inside lay a finely beaded medicine pouch and small clay pots filled with remedies she recognized at once. "Our healer, Ona, is old," Selah explained. "She wishes to meet the white woman who knows healing. If you come with us, she will teach you our medicine. You will teach her yours." It was more than an invitation. It was belonging. Purpose. Martha's throat tightened. "I am honored," she said. Selah studied her with steady eyes. "You have no children, but you have brought many into the world. Among us that makes you powerful, not broken. The spirits move through you." Before Martha could answer, voices rose outside. Horace Dunley had returned, flanked by Preacher Gideon Slade and a larger group of armed men. But something had changed. Women were gathering, wives and mothers, some holding babies Martha had delivered. "It's time, Miss Kells," Dunley called. "The Indians are leaving, and you're leaving with them." Martha stepped onto the porch, her medical bag in one hand, the Apache bundle in the other. She had packed during the night, resigned to what seemed unavoidable. Then she saw the women blocking the street. "You can't do this, Charles," Faye Loomis said, pushing forward, her gentle face set hard. "You have no legal right to exile her." "I have every right to protect this town from those who consort with our enemies," Dunley snapped. "Enemies?" Irene Cutter spoke up, the baker's wife whose life Martha had saved. "The Apache haven't attacked us in 2 years. The only enemy I see is ignorance." "And pride," Noelle Branton added, the sheriff's wife. "Male pride that can't stand a woman knowing more than a man with fancy papers." Dr. Vernon Pike, lingering at the edge, stepped forward. "Now see here, this is enough." "Enough of you," Faye cut in. "Where were you when my sister was hemorrhaging last winter? Drunk in your office. Martha saved her." "And my daughter," another woman cried, "when she had the fever and you said nothing could be done." The accusations spilled out, years of silence breaking at once. Martha watched, stunned, as women who had avoided her days ago now stood in her defense. Mounted now, Tyan watched with Kiro secured before him. His warriors waited in stillness, their presence heavy and undeniable. "Enough!" Preacher Gideon Slade raised his arms. "This woman has been judged. She is barren, unwomanly, and now a traitor to her own race." "The only thing barren here is your compassion," a quiet voice said. All turned as Maud Loomis, Edgar's elderly mother and the town's oldest resident, stepped forward, cane in hand. At 82, she carried iron in her spine. "I've lived here since before this was called a territory," she said, fixing Slade with a hard stare. "I've buried 2 husbands and 5 children. I've seen wars, plagues, and droughts, and I have never seen such foolishness." She faced the crowd. "Martha Kells delivered half the children in this town. She saved more lives than any of you can count, and because she saved an Apache child, you want to cast her out. The law," Dunley began. "Don't lecture me on law, Charles," Maud snapped. "I remember when you were a card sharp looking for easy marks. Show me the statute that says saving a life is a crime. Show me where compassion is illegal." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Martha saw Sheriff Cole Branton shift, torn between duty and conscience, the weight of the moment settling on him. Furthermore, Maud Loomis pressed on, her voice steady and unyielding. "If Martha Kells is driven out, who will bring your babies into this world? Who will tend your sick when Dr. Vernon Pike is too drunk or too proud to lift a hand? She glanced pointedly at several visibly pregnant women. You think on that, ladies. Think hard. The split in the crowd was plain now. Horace Dunley and his supporters on one side, the women and a growing number of men on the other. The Apache watched in silence, patient as people who had witnessed many such quarrels among white towns. Then Cairo spoke, his young voice cutting clean through the shouting. Papa, the healing woman saved me. Why do her people want to hurt her? Tyan's reply carried across the street. Because, my son, some people fear what they do not understand. They cling to hatred rather than open their hearts to wisdom. His gaze fixed on Dunley. Among my people, we say, the fool throws away the corn and keeps the cob. You do the same, casting out a healer for the sake of small minds. Tears stung Martha's eyes. Gratitude, sorrow, uncertainty all tangled together. She had packed to leave, had accepted exile. Now, seeing Red Mesa torn apart over her, she no longer knew what was right. I need a moment, she said quietly, stepping back into her cabin. Inside, she looked around the narrow room that had been her world for so many years. The shelves of medicines, the table where she had fought death time and again, the window from which she had watched Red Mesa live and breathe. Could she truly leave it all? A soft knock broke her thoughts. She opened the door to find Tyan standing there, having dismounted and left Kiro with his aunt. You are troubled, he said. It was not a question. I thought I was ready to go, Martha admitted. But now I see some of my people value me. Some, Tyan agreed. Not all. Perhaps not enough. He was silent for a moment, then spoke carefully. Among my people are healers who walk between worlds. They live neither fully with the tribe nor fully alone, serving all who need them. Perhaps this is your path. What do you mean? You need not choose only one world. The desert is wide. There are places between your town and our lands where a healer could live, serving both peoples. Martha considered it. This town would never accept that, and your people might not either. My people already have, Tyan said. As for your town... He gestured toward the shouting outside. Change comes slowly, like water wearing stone. But it comes. He placed something in her hand, a small silver medallion etched with Apache symbols. This marks you as under my protection. Any Apache who sees it will know you are friend, not enemy. Wherever you go, you are welcome among us. Martha closed her fingers around the medallion, its weight both heavy and comforting. Thank you, she whispered. When they stepped back outside, the crowd fell silent. All eyes turned to Martha, waiting. She drew a deep breath and moved forward. I've heard every word. Kind and cruel. I've seen this town at its worst, and today, some of you at your best. Her gaze settled on Dunley and his followers. Many of you don't want me here. You fear me because I don't fit your idea of what a woman should be. Because I learned from people you call enemies. Because I believe healing matters more than hate. She turned to the women who had stood for her. And you found your voices today. Don't lose them again. This town needs them. Finally, she faced Tyan and the Apache. You offered me a home and honor. I'm more grateful than you know. She squared her shoulders. But I'm not leaving. Not today. The reaction was instant. Dunley's face darkened. You can't. I can, Martha cut in. I'm going nowhere. Mayor Dunley, this is my home. I've bled for this town, saved its children, cared for its sick. If you want me gone, you'll have to drag me out. She glanced at the women gathered around her. And I don't think that will be as easy as you imagined. Faye Loomis stepped to her side. Martha stays. Martha stays. echoed Irene Cutter. One by one, the women took up the chant. Martha stays, Martha stays. At last, Sheriff Cole Branton spoke. Charles, back down. This isn't worth tearing the town apart. Dunley looked around, seeing his support crumble. Even some of his armed men lowered their rifles, unwilling to face their own wives and mothers. This isn't over, he snarled. Then he turned and stalked away, Preacher Gideon Slade and Dr. Vernon Pike trailing behind him. The crowd slowly thinned, yet many women lingered, brushing Martha Kells's arm, whispering apologies and quiet thanks. It was no final triumph. She knew some doors would remain closed, some faces would still turn away, but it was a beginning. Tyon swung back into the saddle, settling Kiro carefully in front of him. You have chosen a difficult road, he said to Martha, but perhaps the right one. The offer still stands, Martha replied softly. You know where to find us. Selah approached one last time. The old medicine woman wishes you to remember this, she said. Healing is not only herbs and blades, it is joining what has been torn apart. Today you began that work. As the Apache rode off, Cairo turned and waved, his young face bright with a life that had nearly slipped away. Martha lifted her hand in return, the silver medallion warm against her palm. She remained there long after the riders vanished into the desert shimmer, feeling the full weight of her choice. Behind her, Red Mesa resumed its routines, altered forever by what had happened. She knew consequences would follow, hard days, harder battles. But for now, she had earned the right to remain, to heal, to stand as herself in a town only beginning to recognize her worth. A healer between worlds. Perhaps that had always been her calling. 2 weeks passed after the Apache departure, and Red Mesa settled into a tense, uneasy quiet. Martha continued her work, though everything felt different now. Some women came openly, no longer sneaking to her door. Others still crossed the street to avoid her. The town was split, the strain thick in the air. One morning, as Martha ground herbs at her table, the sound of fast-approaching horses reached her ears. She stepped to the window and saw a plume of dust rising. Not from the desert, but from the eastern road. Government riders, tight formation. Her stomach tightened. She had known this moment would come. They entered town with practiced precision. At their head rode a man dressed in black, despite the heat, his sharp, humorless face shaded by a bowler hat. 6 frontier marshals followed close behind, their badges flashing in the sun. They reined in before the mayor's office. From her doorway, Martha watched Horace Dunley emerge, puffed with false authority yet visibly uneasy. Dr. Vernon Pike hurried out after him, medical bag in hand, as though that alone granted him legitimacy. The man in black dismounted with deliberate calm. I am Malcolm Reeve, Territorial Inspector, he announced, his voice carrying down the street. I am here to investigate reports of unlawful medical practice and unauthorized association with hostile Apache elements. Martha's fingers clenched around her mortar. Dunley had followed through on his threat. Within the hour, the inquiry convened inside the town hall. Martha was summoned at once. She went with her head held high, medical bag in hand. If she were to be judged, they would see the tools she had used to save lives. The hall was packed. Nearly all of Red Mesa had found reason to attend. Dunley sat front and center with Preacher Gideon Slade and Dr. Pike, their satisfaction barely concealed. But the women were there too. Faye Loomis, Irene Cutter, Noelle Branton, and many more. Faces set, unyielding. Inspector Reeve sat behind the judge's bench like a hawk, eyes sharp and watchful. Miss Martha Kells, he began without ceremony, you are charged with practicing medicine without proper certification, endangering public health, and consorting with Apache hostiles. How do you respond? I have served this town for 20 years, Martha answered evenly. "I have never claimed to be a doctor. I am a midwife and herbalist." "Yet you performed surgical intervention on an Apache child," Reeve replied. "You administered regulated substances and made decisions reserved for licensed physicians. These are serious violations of territorial law." Dr. Pike rose quickly. "If I may, Inspector, I can attest to Miss Kells's reckless incompetence." For the next hour, Pike poured out grievances, every slight, every challenge to his authority, twisting Martha's successes into accidents and her knowledge into dangerous guesswork. Dunley and Slade followed, branding her everything from a heretic to a traitor. Martha sat in silence as Reeve took meticulous notes. She felt the support of the women behind her, but sympathy carried little weight against written law. At last, Reeve looked up. "Does anyone speak on behalf of the accused?" "I do." The voice came from the back of the hall. All heads turned to see Edgar Loomis standing, but he was not alone. Beside him stood a small, neatly dressed man with wire-rimmed spectacles, a stranger to Martha. "And you are?" Reeve asked coolly. "Edgar Loomis, president of the Red Mesa Bank," he said firmly, "and this gentleman beside me is Dr. Julian North, formerly of the University of Pennsylvania Medical College." A ripple of stunned murmurs swept the hall. Dr. Titzortwort, Vernon Pike's face drained of color. Dr. North stepped forward, calm and composed. "I received a letter from Mr. Loomis detailing the medical circumstances here in Red Mesa. I was already en route to California for academic research and chose to make a short detour to evaluate the situation personally." "This is highly irregular," Malcolm Reeve objected. "So is condemning a healer without a full inquiry," Dr. North replied evenly. "Over the last 3 days, I have reviewed Martha Kells's methods, records, and outcomes. With your permission, I would like to present my findings." Reeve hesitated, then nodded. Dr. North opened a leather portfolio. "Regarding the rattlesnake envenomation of the Apache child, Ms. Kells employed wound drainage, ammonia application, and precisely measured digitalis to stabilize cardiac response. This approach is not only medically sound, it reflects an advanced understanding of venom progression. Survival rates after 48 hours without intervention fall below 10%. The child achieved full recovery." He turned toward the benches. "I also interviewed 37 women whom Ms. Kells assisted during childbirth. Her maternal mortality rate stands at approximately 2%, well below the national average of 5%. A pause. "For comparison, Doctor, Pike's rate is 8%. Pike sputtered. "Those numbers are documented in the town registry," Dr. North interrupted. "I verified them personally." "Case by case," he continued, each example underscoring Martha's competence and exposing Pike's failures. The crowd shifted uneasily. Horace Dunley's smug expression tightened into concern. "In summary," Dr. North concluded, "while Ms. Kells lacks formal certification, her practical expertise surpasses that of many licensed physicians. Prosecuting her would mean punishing skill in favor of inadequacy." Reeve cleared his throat. "The law still requires licensing." "Ordinarily, yes," Dr. North replied with a faint smile. "However, territorial statute includes a grandfather provision for established practitioners of good standing who served their communities prior to the enactment of licensing laws. Ms. Kells has practiced here since 1865, well before those regulations existed." Martha felt her heart leap. She had never known. Reeve shuffled his papers, visibly unsettled. "There remains the issue of fraternization with hostile Apache elements. I believe that matter can be addressed." The voice came from the doorway. A collective gasp filled the room. Tyon stood there, dressed in a blend of Apache and American clothing. Beside him was a white officer in uniform, Colonel Abram Holt from Fort Benson. Chief Tyan came to the fort yesterday, Holt said clearly, with intelligence regarding rustlers planning to raid regional cattle drives. His cooperation has likely prevented loss of life and potential conflict. He credits Ms. Kells with building the trust that made this possible. Tyan stepped forward, ignoring the fearful murmurs. The healing woman saved my son. Through her, I learned not all white men wish us harm. That learning led to words instead of war. Tell me, how is peace a crime? Reeves' rigid posture faltered. What had begun as a simple inquiry was becoming something far larger. Faye Loomis rose to her feet. Inspector, the women of this town ask to be heard. Before Reeve could refuse, she continued. Martha Kells has been our lifeline for 20 years. Yes, she learned from Mexicans, from Apache, from anyone willing to teach, but is that weakness or wisdom? She sought knowledge to better serve us. Other women stood, one after another. Stories poured out. The infant who could not breathe until Martha cleared its lungs. The hemorrhage stopped with herbs after Pike surrendered hope. The fever broken with willow bark tea. Each account built another layer of proof. Then, a young woman stepped forward. Lydia Crowson, barely 17, an infant cradled in her arms. This is my daughter Hope, she said, voice trembling. She wouldn't be alive without Miss Kells. I was bleeding badly after the birth. Dr. Pike told my family to prepare for the worst. She met Pike's eyes without flinching. Miss Kells pushed him aside. She used methods he called improper and crude. But I lived. My child has a mother. She lifted her chin. How can that be wrong? Silence fell over the hall. Inspector Reeve leaned back slowly, his composure finally cracking. Malcolm Reeve surveyed the crowded hall. The accusers shrinking into their benches, the defenders standing firm, and Martha Kells seated quietly at the center of it all. This is unprecedented, he said at last. I arrived expecting a straightforward case of unlawful practice. Instead, he spread his hands, I find a town split down its own spine. Martha rose. Divided between fear and courage, she said evenly. Between valuing paper over proof and law over life. She let her gaze travel the room. I've never claimed a title I don't hold. I am a midwife and an herbalist who spent her years learning how to keep people alive. If that makes me guilty, then I accept it. But if healing itself is wrong, what does that say about us? Reeve fell silent. After a long moment, he turned. Dr. Julian North, would you be willing to formally attest to Ms. Kells's competence? I would, North said at once. More than that, I propose a special territorial license recognizing her as a practicing midwife and herbalist. That's outrageous, Dr. Vernon Pike burst out. More outrageous than your outcomes? North replied coolly. Perhaps worry less about her credentials and more about sharpening your own. Reeve raised a hand. I'll review the statutes and consult the governor. Until then, Ms. Kells may continue her work under Dr. North's supervision. I'll be in town another week, North added. I'd like to study some of Ms. Kells's preparations. The Academy would too. The room erupted. Protests from Horace Dunley's faction, cheers from Martha's supporters, confusion everywhere. Through it all, Martha sat still, scarcely believing it. Tyan stepped to her side amid the din. Walking between worlds is hard, he said softly, but not impossible. Thank you for coming, Martha replied. You didn't have to. You saved my son, he said. The debt stands. After a pause, he added, perhaps I am learning that walk myself. As the crowd thinned, Martha found herself beside Dr. North. That was remarkable, she said. How did you truly come to be here? North smiled. Edgar Loomis is my cousin. Everything else I said is true. Your work matters. Medicine needs fewer gatekeepers and more healers. Pike won't forgive this. Maybe he'll learn from it, North said. Competition can do wonders. He adjusted his spectacles. Now, those desert plants you use against infection? As they talked, something shifted in Red Mesa. The fight wasn't over. Dunley wouldn't vanish, but for the first time in months, Martha felt steady ground. She was still here, still healing, building a bridge she'd been crossing all along. Spring came early that year, painting the desert with purple lupines, gold poppies, and soft cactus pink. Martha stood at town's edge at sunrise, the mountains washed in copper and rose. At 52, silver threaded her hair. The lines on her face traced years of sun, sorrow, and hard-won grace. 5 years had passed since the hearing, years that reshaped Red Mesa. The clinic now stood at its heart, partnered with a new building on Main Street bearing a shared sign in English and Apache. "You're up early," came a familiar voice. Martha turned to Tyon, gray touching his temples now, the weight of leadership in his step. "Couldn't sleep," she said. "Today feels important." He nodded. "The councils meet." The first joint session, Stonewind elders and the town council together, once unthinkable. "My son will attend," Tyon added. "He speaks of becoming a healer. Both paths." Kiro, 15 and tall as his father, had the hands for it, and the heart. He learned at the clinic and with Apache teachers alike. "He'll do well," Martha said. They walked into town as the light strengthened. Apache traders set up beside local merchants. Children from both communities played together, laughter erasing old lines. At the clinic, Dr. Vernon Pike was already with patients, sobriety and humility replacing old habits. He looked up, smiling. "Morning, partner. Elena Morrow is here. The baby's coming?" Martha set her bag down and moved, calm and certain. Elena Morrow was carrying her 4th child, and at 41 the pregnancy carried real danger. Martha Kells had watched her closely for months, adjusting tonics, counting pulses, listening to every warning the body whispered. When labor came, it lasted 6 hard hours. It turned difficult fast. The cord was looped tight around the baby's neck, and Elena's strength began to slip away. Martha and Dr. Vernon Pike moved together without a word, hands steady, instincts aligned. Old rivalries vanished under the weight of necessity. When little Nell Morrow finally drew breath, her cry cut through the room like a bell. It was the sweetest sound either of them had heard in years. "You did it," Pike said as they worked to settle mother and child. "That maneuver with the cord, I've never seen anything like it." "Apache technique," Martha replied, washing her hands. "Refined with surgical principles. Sella showed me the foundation years ago." Pike shook his head, half in awe. "Brilliant. I was a fool to resist learning from them." "We all were fools in our own ways," Martha said gently. "What matters is that we learned." At noon, the joint council gathered in the town hall. Every bench was filled. People lined the walls and spilled into the street outside. Martha took a seat near the back, content to watch rather than speak. At one side of the table sat Mayor Silas Rook, elected after Horace Dunley's public fall. Across from him sat Tyon, flanked by the Stonewind elders. Between them lay the papers, agreements shaped by years of quiet cooperation now ready for ink, mutual aid, shared resources, peace made practical. There were objections. Preacher Gideon Slade, diminished but persistent, warned against unholy alliances. A few elders spoke of guarding tradition, but most had seen the harvest of cooperation. Then young Jonah Rook, 11 now and walking with only a faint limp from his accident, stood. "I wouldn't be here without both peoples," he said simply. "Miss Martha saved me. And the Apache who helped rescue me saved me too. We're stronger together." The treaties were signed as afternoon light slanted through the windows. Martha felt a quiet wonder. This was the same room where she had once stood alone and unwelcome. That evening, a celebration rose along the creek where Martha and Tyon had talked so often over the years. Tables sagged beneath food from both traditions, fiddles braided with Apache drums, weaving a new sound that felt right. Martha sat on a fallen log, watching with a deep, settled satisfaction. Faye Loomis joined her, a grandmother now many times over thanks to Martha's steady hands. "You did this," Faye said softly. "No," Martha answered. "It began with a frightened father and a dying child. I was only the bridge." Faye squeezed her hand anyway. "We owe you." As dusk deepened, people came to her. Young mothers, Apache riders whose children she'd treated, even Pike, awkward but sincere in his thanks for their partnership. Then Tyon sat beside her, quiet for a long moment. "I have something for you," he said at last, offering a small leather pouch. Inside lay a silver pendant worked with symbols from both Apache and American traditions. "It's beautiful," Martha breathed. "It was my mother's," Tyon said, "and hers before her. It belongs to a woman of great medicine, one who walks between worlds and makes them one." Martha's hands trembled. "I can't." "You can, you must." His gaze held hers. "You earned it through service, by seeing people, not divisions." He fastened it at her throat, his touch gentle and sure. They sat close, sharing warmth and the familiar scent of sage and leather. Something passed between them. Unspoken, understood. Two lives bound by care, by the choice to build where others once burned. "Thank you," Martha whispered, meaning far more than the gift. Later, she walked back to her cabin with others, Apache and townsfolk together. No longer two crowds, but one community learning its own shape. At her door, she paused, looking back at Red Mesa, so changed from the place that had tried to drive her out. Lights glowed in windows, where mixed families now lived. The clinic stood ready for whatever morning would bring. Children who would grow up taking cooperation for granted slept soundly. Martha touched the pendant, feeling not weight but purpose. Inside, her medical bag waited, traditional herbs beside modern instruments, wisdom braided into practice. She lit her lamp, opened her journal, and began to write. Today did not mark an ending. It marked a change of shape. The woman once whispered about as Barren had helped bring a different kind of world into being. The midwife pushed aside had delivered two peoples into a shared tomorrow. My purpose is no longer a question. They call me the woman who bridges, and I have learned that the strongest medicine doesn't live in herbs or instruments, but in the courage to reach across the wide space of misunderstanding. Every child I help into the light will grow in a place where Apache and white stand as neighbors, not foes. Every life saved tightens another thread in the living weave we are making. I do not know how many years remain to me, but I know how I will spend them, in service, in teaching, in the patient work of building bridges. Cairo, and others like him, will carry this work forward when my hands at last grow still. The clinic will stand long after we are gone, a quiet proof of what becomes possible when healing refuses to recognize borders. Tonight, I am at peace. Tonight, I am exactly where I belong. Not wholly of one world or the other, but in the space between, holding both together. It is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. Martha Kells closed her journal and readied herself for sleep, knowing tomorrow would bring fresh trials and new chances to heal. But tonight she allowed rest to settle in, content in the knowledge that the useless, barren midwife had become something neither she nor Red Mesa had imagined, a cornerstone of a future built on understanding rather than fear. The desert wind moved through sage and mesquite, carrying the promise of rain. Martha slept with the pendant warm against her heart, surrounded by a community that had learned its hardest lesson. Our shared humanity is stronger than our differences. Morning would come with babies to deliver, wounds to tend, knowledge to pass on. That was tomorrow. Tonight belonged to gratitude, the quiet joy of a life well lived, a purpose made clear, and a legacy that would outlast them all. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West, stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso Legal. Disclaimer: these stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.